Greetings and welcome to our daily Devo for Thursday, the 12th of January in 2023. We are using some collection of writings from A.W. Tozer, Meditations on the Trinity. They've been put together by Moody Publishers from a number of different resources that came out in A.W. Tozer's name. This is about the Trinity, as the title says, and we're looking at God the Father in this first section. Devo for today is entitled This Little Cheap God. Sounds questionable, doesn't it? This little cheap God. From 1 Timothy 1:17, now to the King eternal, immortal, invisible, the only God, be honor and glory forever and ever. Amen. If God had goodness, but there was one spot in God that wasn't good, then he wouldn't be our God and Father. If God had love, but didn't have all the love, just 99 and 9/10% of the love, or even a higher percentage, God still would not be God. God, to be God, must be infinite in all that he is. He must have no bound and no limit, no stopping place, no point beyond which he cannot go. When you think of God or anything about God, you'll have to think infinitely about God. You may have a Charlie horse in your head for 2 weeks after trying to follow this, but it's a mighty good cure for this little cheap God we have today. There's the problem. That's our perspective. This little cheap God we've made up is the one you can pal around with. Man upstairs, the fellow who helps you win baseball games. That God is not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He isn't the God who laid the foundations of the heaven and the earth. He's some other God, some other cheap God we've created. Someone once said that God created us in his image, and we're trying to return the favor by creating him in our image. These are good thoughts. These are challenging thoughts. Think about how we often give God the credit for insignificant things, as though that's his main order of business, is dealing with our little insignificant lives and making sure everything comes out the way we want or we get what we want. And we do. I remember I read a book many years ago, and this fella described driving down the highway in his car and the Lord appearing to him in the seat next to him. And he kept right on driving and having a good time. I read that and I could not help but think of all the times in the scriptures, like Moses, like Isaiah, and others, who had an encounter with God, and their first response was to fall on their knees before him in all of his glory. We dare not cheapen this God. We dare not lessen this God down into this little cheap God that we put in our pocket. This is good. This is challenging. I like you have a Charlie horse in your head for 2 weeks after trying to follow this, but it's a mighty good cure for this little cheap God we have today. We have to think infinitely about God. We have to put him in a category all by himself that we can't figure out. And that's what leads us to humble ourselves in his presence. Here's the prayer for today. Lord, forgive me for assuming such a cheap familiarity with such an awesome God. You are worthy of so much more. May I begin to learn to think infinitely about you today. Amen. Blessings to you today.